What's the most famous fraud in history? It wasn't about gold, or oil, or Wall Street stocks. It was about postage stamps. Yes, you heard that right. Stamps. This absurdly simple promise of easy money fooled thousands of ordinary families, pulled in millions of dollars, and gave its name to every scam that followed. We call them Ponzi schemes, but back in 1920, it was just Mr. Ponzi's deal. To understand why people lined up to hand this man their life savings, you have to imagine his world, a world of neighbors whispering that someone down the block just doubled their money, a world of immigrants desperate for a shortcut to the American dream, a world where the fear of missing out was more powerful than reason, and that world looks uncomfortably familiar. The man at the center was Charles Ponzi, an Italian immigrant who arrived in America in 1903 with just $2.50 in his pocket. He spent years bumbling from job to job, sometimes scheming, often broke. He even did time in prison for forging checks. He wasn't a financial titan. He was a charming hustler. But charm goes a long way when people are desperate for hope, and post-World War I America was overflowing with desperation. The year was 1919. The war was over. The Spanish flu had killed millions, and immigrants were flooding into cities like Boston, chasing a better life. The stock market was booming, but not for them. They worked in factories and on docks, grinding Hawaii. So when whispers spread that a man in Boston could turn $100 into $150 in just 45 days, they listened it. Ponzi's scheme sounded brilliant. He told investors he'd found a loophole in international postage. After the war, you could theoretically buy international reply coupons cheap in one country and redeem them in America for more valuable U.S. stamps. Arbitrage, he called it, no risk profit. Most people didn't understand the mechanics, and they didn't care. They just had the bottom line. 50% profit in 45 days. Imagine how this spread. A barber invests $10 and gets back $15. He tells every customer in his chair. A shopkeeper puts in $100, gets back $150, and tells the family across the street. A widow scrapes together her savings, sees it double, and tells her church friends. Each story multiplied the legend. People didn't care about postal coupons. They cared that ordinary people just like them, were suddenly getting rich. By 1920, lines of men and women stretched down the street outside his office, clutching cash. At his peak, Ponzi was taking in $1 million a day, equivalent of tens of millions today. Newspapers celebrated him as a financial wizard. Of course, the genius was a mirage. There weren't enough coupons in the entire world to justify his profits. He was just paying early investors with cash from new ones. Classic fraud. The cracks started to show. A financial analyst named Clarence Barron asked the obvious question. If this was so easy, why wasn't everyone doing it? Why wasn't Ponzi just using his own money to get rich? The Boston Post started publishing skeptical articles, but even as doubts spread, people kept handing over their money. Why? Because their neighbors were still getting paid. The fear of being the fool who missed out was overwhelming. Behind the scenes, Ponzi was spiraling. He bought a mansion with a heated pool and servants, flaunting his success. But he was desperately trying to keep the machine from collapsing. State investigators finally moved in and found what everyone suspected. There were no coupons, no real investments, just a massive hole of debt. To cover his promises, he would have needed over 160 million reply coupons. In reality, less than 30,000 existed worldwide. The illusion shattered. When he was arrested in August 1920, the damage was staggering. Investors lost around $20 million, over $200 million in today's money. Thousands of families were wiped out. Ponzi served a few years in prison, tried a few more scams, and eventually died broke and forgotten in a charity hospital. But his name became immortal. Every fraud that follows his pattern using new money to pay old promises is a Ponzi scheme. Bernie Madoff did it with billions in 2008. Countless crypto schemes do it today. The technology changes, but the psychology is eternal. It's not about the mechanics. It's about exploiting our fear of missing out. It's about our willingness to trust a neighbor's story more than cold, hard numbers. So the lesson from Charles Ponzi isn't about postage stamps. It's about recognizing the whispers in your own life. The guaranteed investment. The profit with no risk. The friend who says everyone's doing it. When you hear that, remember the crowds in Boston, convinced they were getting rich, right up until the moment they lost everything. If this gave you a new perspective, hit that subscribe button. History has the answers, and I'll show you where to look.